Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Jeff Coltenback here, and we're back again with my new segment. And for now, we're just going to call it Jeff Coltenback's Pet Talk. And today, my guest is David Stagg, and David is a certified professional dog trainer out of Bayside, Queens. David's website is davidsdogtraining.com, and I'll make sure I throw the link down there, and I'll put it in the description as well, so you guys can contact David. And today we're going to be talking about general dog training, but more importantly, the dog trainer-client relationship and the roles and responsibilities of each party. So welcome, David. Thanks for coming aboard.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I got started about 10 years ago training. I got two Havanese myself, and I first started with my first Havanese, Cooper, and I was looking to try to get some more flexibility with my work and so forth, because my wife does a lot of traveling. So when we got our dog, we became very friendly with our breeder, and he said, "Why don't you become a dog trainer? It gives you a lot of flexibility. It's relaxing, et cetera, et cetera." So I looked into it, got certified, and here I am now.
Excellent.
Yep.
It's relaxing?
It depends. I guess what you ask, right?
Exactly. It depends on the dog and the situation. No.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
No, but I mean, yeah, we love what we do. That's for sure, and that does, and the flexibility is awesome too. And incidentally, for people who are watching, David and I, we are on a forum through Dog Trainers Connection. We meet pretty much every 2 weeks, and there's a group of us dog trainers that get together, and we talk about a whole slew of topics. And I'll make sure I throw Dog Trainers Connection link down below, because they have a lot of cool videos, and they've been bringing dog trainers together for like 20 plus years. So I'll make sure I put that down in the description as well. So, David and I, we've been on that forum up probably a year and a half now. I think we've been doing it.
At least that, maybe a little longer.
Maybe even longer. So,
Yep.
We never met in person, but we've gotten to know each other a little bit. And it's really cool because, we all come from kind of different backgrounds. We're all at different stages in our dog training journey. So, that brought us here today to talk a little bit about some of the things that, that have been on my mind, as far as, especially somebody like David, who specializes in-home, dog training, particularly things like puppy kindergarten and house training. You want to talk a little bit about that, David?
Yeah, I mean, when I meet with my clients, a lot of times they will, or like when they ask me questions on the phone and so forth, when I first give them a call to follow up with them, what have you, they'll ask me sometimes, well, I'm debating, do you do group class? I said no, and I give them the pros and the cons about both, because there's advantage and disadvantage to both. For group classes, that's very good. Some dogs are just very good right off the bat, and they're good with just socializing with a dog. Typically, if they're under 3 months of age, and if it's well run class. Oftentimes it's just a matter of getting them to get on board with that.
Yeah, and I know, and one of the things I've always come across, and I know we've talked about it on our forum, and we've had conversations about this, is the whole fear thing that goes into veterinarians, and rightfully so. They don't want to put puppies at risk about getting them out and about before they have their vaccines, but that also kind of puts the owner behind the 8 ball from a training perspective, right?
Exactly. So if you can get them to before that that sensitive period, before that 3 months, maybe 4 months period of time, and get them to get socialized, that's a great thing. And getting back to the group classes, some dogs, if you put them in a setting where a whole bunch of other dogs, even if they're very young and they get frightened, that may not be good. So it's better sometimes to work one-on-one with one other dog, maybe 2 dogs, or if it's a group setting, that could be fine if there's maybe some partitions between the dogs, so they don't see each other. But even then, if it's in close proximity, if they hear the other dog, so that's why I always recommend too, when it comes down to private, and that's where the advantage of private comes in, is that you're meeting them at their own place where the dog feels comfortable, typically the owners feel comfortable, and it's in a quiet environment. A lot of times they say, well, I have a problem with my dog outside. They bark, they this, that, and so forth. And I'm like, we can address all that, but we can't just go right out and throw the dog out to the wolves, so to speak. It doesn't quite work that way with dogs. We do that, and we're trying to get the dog to communicate with us, and vice versa. It's not going to happen. We got to start small in the home when there's very little distractions. Get them to focus on what we want them to do. Get a foundation. Doesn't have to be perfect, and then we can transition slowly to outside.
Yeah,
And
I agree 100%. And I tell my clients all the time, regardless of the dog's life stage, because especially with everybody adopting nowadays, sometimes they're getting these young adults or middle-aged dogs that they've never been exposed to any kind of obedience foundation. And I
hmm
say, got to start where there's no distractions. And, I said, look, put it this way, whatever reliability rate your dog has inside your living room, cut that in half when you go outside.
right.
If they respond 80, if they respond to the owner 80% of the time inside, you're looking at 40% outside and distractions.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And when you put it to them that way, they're like, you know what, yeah, that makes sense. I never thought about that. It's like, yeah, the dog is obedient, does more or less everything we want him to do inside, he or she. Outside, it's a different game. It's a
It's a whole
different
new
game.
world.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
And
And getting back to your socialization, I think it's I tell the owners, I said, and I have some handouts I give that I have some from some newsletters and some well-respected newsletters that talk from the ABSB, American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior, what has that position statement you're familiar with, and just what's the proper way to socialize. It doesn't mean you have to interact with other dogs or other people. That's an aspect to it, of course, but just smelling the roses, getting out there, the smells, the sights, the sounds, etc. And there's different ways you can do that. Maybe maybe if you have a small dog, you can put them in a cart and take them into the store if the store permits the dog in there. Take them for car rides. Of course, if the dog is good with cars, if the dog's not too comfortable, that's something else you got to work on. But there's a lot of different ways you can socialize a dog without actually, getting into situations where you wouldn't want to take the dog to a dog park in the beginning, before all the shots are there. Don't put them on the grass, things of that nature. So.
yeah, being, that's the one caution with especially puppies who may not have been vaccinated yet. The risk the high risk areas like dog parks or places where pets frequent. But I tell people the same thing. Look, if you have a friend who has a dog and you know that dog is healthy and you want to get that puppy exposed to an animal in your home, that's a low risk situation, and it's something I generally would recommend.
Right.
Or like you said, the carts. Like I tell people all the time, like, look, if you just put your puppy in a Home Depot shopping cart, they don't have to interact with anyone or anything, and
hmm
you're still starting that socialization process.
Yeah, they're still getting some good stimulus.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
and then obviously then after puppy stuff, we talk about obedience, and everybody knows sit down, come and stay. But I think and this probably ties into a little bit with. I love the fact that you have one of the services you provide is the Tuneups, right? Because we do the obedience, sit down, come and stay. We'll give clients, recommendations, structure, a training schedule, maybe care, a little advice on nutrition and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, if they're not following through with the foundation we set forth, I'm guessing that's why you offer Tuneups, yes?
Exactly. One of the analogy I like to put it is like if it's like riding a bike. We all most of us learned how to ride a bike, right? But then a lot of times you get older, you start, it's more convenient to go get in a car or whatever, and then you're like, oh, you know what? Let me go get back into biking a little bit. Well, maybe it's partly age, but nonetheless, you still have that foundation. But when I go on there, I can't do with one hand or with no hands anymore. I got to put both hands on the steering wheel to go. I need that little tune-up to get myself, going again. It's no different than dogs. It's the same thing. I think a lot of owners, unfortunately, and I don't hold any prejudice. That's one thing I tell them. I said, listen, you can tell me anything you want. I don't look down upon what you're thinking. You've got to just work through it and don't, just work through it basically.
Yeah, and I think, and I like that you pointed that out, because when I have a relationship with a client and I hear from them after 6 or 7 months, like even if I like if it goes to voicemail and I'm listening to my voicemail and they're like, hey Jeff, this is so and so with Fluffy, and my first thought is, yeah, they need a refresh. or
Yeah.
I met them when their dog was like 18 months old, and now the dog is 2.5 years old. It's mature, and they're experiencing some new things.
Exactly. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
experience that with your tune-up?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Or I've had situations where they may have moved from one house to another home, And it's like now, yeah, and you know, now his dog is acting differently for various reasons, and it could be the environment, the structure, maybe, you know, the family's not getting along, whatever, and that's something that you have to be kind of tread lightly because that's not really your business per se. But if there could be construction across the street, you know, various things, and that's just like us. It's stressful on us, but it's stressful on the dog as well. So it could be that, and it can also be what you were alluding to as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of good
You know.
points. And yeah, I get a lot of environmental changes. You know, it's not, you know, physical moves obviously are environmental changes, but new additions, whether it's another animal or a child or,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, grandpa moved in, you know, I mean, there's so many things that can skew the environment where, you know, those tune-ups and refresh come in handy. But I think at the end of the day too is, and I don't know what your experience has been though, they when we offer that foundation of obedience, and maybe we're doing some minor behavior modification or giving them some structure and stuff for, you know, to raise their dog, they kind of hit a plateau and maybe they get a little complacent, and, you know, maybe things go by the wayside, and that dog that used to sit like that now sits like, yeah, I guess I'll sit, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of goes that, and that's one of the reasons why I want to talk to you about the whole client trainer relationship, because, and especially because I know, you know, you have a really good grasp on making sure that you not, you know, not just cater to what the client needs, but you also have, um, you're very much in touch with your responsibility as a trainer. Do you want to talk a little bit about the client trainer relationship?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, what I always like to tell my clients is that, listen, when we're done here, I'm gonna, you know, usually I'll give them handouts and so forth, and I'll tell them a lot of this stuff is not written in stone. So, you know, within the foundations of the confines of what we're working with, don't be afraid to experiment, you know, a little bit. You know, be realistic, of course, but to me, as long as you're doing things humanely and, you know, in the care of the animal and gentle methods and so forth, why not experiment a little bit with, again, not getting too extreme, try to stay with what I suggest, and go that route. But something else that they can expect from, at least for me, and I think a lot of most of our trainers are this way, I would hope so at least, is just a good follow through. You know, make sure you're available between sessions if they have questions or any concerns, things like that. And on the flip side, I want to maybe call them and say, listen, I'm going to call you in a couple of days and see how things are going. You know, that kind of thing. Um, and I think also just good listening skills and writing. Don't just hear what they're saying and so forth. Write it down, because I think they appreciate it when especially when you follow up and you say, oh, listen, by the way, you told me about your dog doing X, Y, Z, and they're like, oh, I didn't realize, I forgot, I told you that or whatever. And I said, well, how's that going? You know, so I think if you can get in tune, that I think that's the big thing. And you know, I feel like if I can get them, you know, comfortable with me and get us a comfort level, then it's a question of getting comfortable with the dog. I explained to them it's a kind of a third, a third, and a third. A third of it's on me, a third of it's on you, and a third of it's on the dog. We all have to work in partnership to get, you know, to get where we want to go. You know.
Excellent. So now you talked about handouts, and obviously, I mean, I still have physical handouts for some of my clients that maybe they don't have you know, as much of a reliance on technology, but you know, I also have, right on my cell phone, and I have a little folder where, you know, if they prefer technology, I have, you know, 3 or 4 PDF files that I could email them right then and there. Sometimes I even send it to them before I get there. You know, what are the handouts that you provide? What kind of
Yeah,
information
I'll do
are
some
on them?
stuff like that. The Dog Watch newsletter, Whole Dog Journal, some things from Tufts University and Cornell University. So I'm getting it from a scientific point of view, from a veterinary perspective, but also a veterinary behaviorist point of view. So they don't just hear it; it's just some dog trainer that thinks he or she knows what he's talking about. You know, I'm getting it from another point of view, or something that maybe coincides with my beliefs and my thinking. So I'll do that oftentimes.
Cool. And you
Yeah.
also had mentioned that, you know, you mentioned experimenting, I guess, with their training. What do you mean by experimenting with their training?
I guess, you know, basically if you're working with a dog, and let's say I said, you know, maybe hold the sit for 1 or 2 seconds and work from there. Don't be afraid or, or maybe you're trying to get the dog to focus, what have you, and do like a look at me or watch me kind of a thing. Rather than just 1 or 2 seconds, maybe experiment, go up to 5 seconds and see what happens. Worst case scenario, the dog fails, the dog looks away. So, well, 1 or 2 seconds we're good at. 5 seconds is way too much. I should have just gone to 3. I probably just gone to 3. Well, at least you got to go less than 5 seconds, things like that. Maybe it's when it comes to luring the dog with a treat. Maybe it's putting your hand up a little higher. Maybe it's putting your hand a little lower. Maybe it's a different food value treat, or maybe it's a toy, whatever motivates the dog. I oftentimes too, we work with a dog, and for whatever reason, I can't get the dog to do what I'm trying to get him to do. And rather than getting frustrated, even though, I don't present that, I say oftentimes what I'll do, I'll turn over the reins, so to speak, and give the leash to the owner. So you give it a shot. And oftentimes it's actually, they can do a better job than I can if I instruct them, especially if the dog has a fear of people, things like that, where they're kind of okay with them, but they're a little bit unsure, that kind of thing. But it can also work in reverse. Sometimes they're like, oh my gosh, how'd you get my dog to do that? I've been trying every 2 seconds, trying to get him to sit, won't do this, won't do that. You're like a miracle. I said, it's, magic dust, I don't know. So it can kind of go both ways. It just depends on the situation.
That's a great point, because, I've had, and it happens. I mean, a lot of times it's, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe how well my dog is responding to you. And, I'm like, it's the jerky. But
right.
there's times where the dog, for whatever reason, maybe it's a rescue, maybe it's a puppy that hasn't really been socialized yet, and our presence kind of freaks them out a little bit, and they won't necessarily work for a stranger. And sometimes, we got to be hands off. And I think having that flexibility and the understanding, and the relationship with the client, to say, all right, look, so the dog's not responding to me. Like you said, take the leash, take the treats. I'm going to walk you through it. I think that's a great observation that you offered. And I love the fact that, when we're talking about experimenting, people want their dog to like sit and stay for, 90 seconds at 20 feet from the dog. And I'm like,
right.
I'm like, here, I always think, do you remember the movie What About Bob with Bill Murray?
No, I know Bill Murray, but I don't know that.
It was this movie, Bill Murray, he was like a schizophrenic, but he got this book. Richard Dreyfuss was his psychiatrist, and the book was called Baby Steps. So,
oh, it does sound familiar now.
Like
okay.
His whole thing was, okay, baby steps to the elevator, baby steps down the stairs. Like everything was baby steps. And I tell people,
right.
I can't say it now because my clients are half my age now. You don't even know who the hell Bill Murray is, but anyway.
Right.
So I tell people, look, baby steps, because if your dog won't sit and stay 1 foot away from you for 10 seconds, they're not going to sit and stay from you 10 feet away for a minute. The same holds, just like we were talking about earlier with training with low distractions before you move the puppy or the dog out into the world where there are distractions. And like you said, it's okay. So you can't get 3 feet. Get 2 feet, 100% reliable. Then move
exactly.
to 3 feet. It's really
I mean, I tell my clients, I said, listen, you're going to go much faster. It sounds kind of counterintuitive. You're going to go much faster if you go slow. And they look at me like, huh? Like they got 2 heads. You're like, what are you talking about? Yeah. But that's kind of what you have to break it down to. It's if you try to rush it and just force it, it's 9 times out of 10 you're going to fail.
Yeah, and for anyone watching, if you're struggling with, let's just use the stay command for instance. It is, if you can get your dog to stay for 1 minute at 2 feet away from you, and that takes 3 weeks to accomplish that, I guarantee you that it's going to take you a small fraction of the time to get to 5 minutes and 50 feet away, because it's that initial foundation behavior of sit and stay and the separation from you and the time of the stay command. That's where the foundation takes the most work. But once you have that reliability at a short distance in a short amount of time, once you have that, everything else is just so much easier and it happens fast. So
that's very true.
I love that you said that. If you go slower, you'll get faster.
Yeah, exactly.
It's because you want to make sure that foundation is solid, right?
Right.
And my clients and even people on the YouTube channel that comment, they're sick and tired of me hearing me say that repetition creates reliability. And it does. The more repetition you do in a shorter amount of time, which means you then, you have to go slower. You have to start at that 1 foot for 20 seconds before
Right,
you
right.
can get further. But anyway, I love that. If you go slower, you'll get there faster. That's great.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You should like copyright that or
Yeah, you
something.
should put a little, that's a good tagline or something.
Something, maybe a
Yeah,
T-shirt.
right, right.
But yeah, and it's as trainers, obviously we have our mindset on how we're going to approach certain situations. Especially most of the time we're having at least phone conversations with clients before we enter their home. We kind of have an idea of what we need to do. And I think sometimes clients, they think that we're going to go in there and we're going to train their dog and that's it, and they don't have to do anything. But I think it's our responsibility to kind of set some expectations to let them know they got some work to do.
No, absolutely. And what's realistic? What can be done? What can't be done? You know.
Yeah, and that's I mean, it's one thing for I tell my clients, I'm like, look, training starts when I walk out your door. that's when the work
Right,
begins.
right, right, right.
But I mean, what are some of your expectations for clients, or if there's dog owners watching this, what are some things you can suggest to them that because I mean, obviously they have to put some work in. If they don't put work in, they're not going to get the results. I mean, I think it's a healthy expectation that we have for them to be accountable to do some work after we leave.
Right. No, absolutely. Some of the things I expect basically is just to be, open and honest right from the get-go. And that starts with the phone call. I've had a number of cases where I was just going into for basic obedience type of stuff and just some minor behavioral issues. And I walked into a situation recently actually where there was another dog involved. And the client's son, who's an adult son, he was probably in his mid-20s, asked me if I could help work with his other dog because the two dogs, when they get together, they play a little rough. I'm like, that's not a problem, not a problem. And we start working together, and the father never mentioned this to me. The son's never mentioned this to me. Next thing, we're doing a little bit of uh, treat and lead and treat and retreat, that kind of thing, and we're getting them to play a little bit, and then we would take them apart, spread them apart a little bit. Doing that, everything was working fine. Next thing you know, I moved a little bit, and I heard "Arr!" And I'm like, he goes, "Oh, did you bite you?" I go, "No, I don't think so." He goes, "You sure?" I turn around. I said, "Sure enough, that little sucker got my ripped the hole in my pants." I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me," So it's like, luckily that's all that happened. But the dog was very aggressive. Then he went to put him away, and the dog was going up the stairs with him in a harness. He slipped his harness and came after me again. And luckily, it was only about a 35-pound dog.
Right.
But my point being is, the father should not have mentioned this. Should have mentioned this to me up front, like if you ever work with my other dog, what have you.
So
And shouldn't put me in a situation.
This was a behavior they were aware of, but they didn't disclose to you.
Correct. And I was really there mainly just to work with one dog. And I mentioned to his son, I said, "Listen, is your father going to be okay with this?" "Oh yeah, it's not a problem, not a problem." And he didn't mention anything. He goes, "Oh, it's the first time. He's never done that before." So maybe that's the case, but I kind of question that.
Right.
So it's just being open and honest, so I know what I'm getting myself into, whether I'm going to be there for the first time, or even as we're working and something comes up where, let's say I go to sit down on the couch after we've had 3 sessions. For some reason, I've never sat down on the couch. I've always sat in the chair in the dining room or something. I sit on the couch, and all of a sudden the dog acts a little bit either aggressive or in an odd way or whatever it might be. I'm like, well, why is he or she doing that? "Oh yeah, he or she does this because of blah 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 whatever." So that could be part of the reason why the dog's having other issues with other things. So sometimes they forget to tell me, or they don't realize it's a problem, and sometimes maybe they're embarrassed. Various reasons. But as much as you can be transparent, I think that's important, and both for me too. I got to be as transparent to them as they are to me.
Yeah, and that's the word that popped into my head as you were talking, and you're right. We have to be transparent too. And for dog owners out there, I mean, obviously, when we walk into your home, behaviors may crop up that you just didn't anticipate, and we understand that. It's
Right.
But if you know of a behavior or something that you want to be, you want us to focus on, I mean, providing that information is helpful. And, like David said, sometimes you can't think of everything, but especially in cases where there might be triggers in your household, like David said, I've had dogs where you go to approach like the couch, but you don't realize on the other side of the couch is like the dog's bed and their bones. Like,
Hmm.
and all of a
Hmm.
sudden the dog is resource guarding and you had no idea. You're just going to sit down, like
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
I've
yeah.
had that where I'm like, whoa, hey, and then I look and there's like a pile of bones and I'm like, holy crap. So yeah, I mean, for dog owners out there, if you're hiring a dog trainer, and try to be as open as you can, because and David mentioned it earlier that that one third, one third, one third, right? It really is a collaboration between we the dog trainers, you the owner, and your dog. We really do need to work together. That's how we're going to experience the most success. So I love that that transparency. I love transparency to begin with, and anyone who's seen me on YouTube or even the forum, I'm pretty much what you see is what you get. Like I'm terrible at hiding shit.
No, really.
And people when they meet me in person too, like obviously if I'm meeting a client for the first time, I have to kind of feel my way around them because not everybody is open to my overt jovial New Jersey sarcasm. um, but for the most part, what you see is what you get, and most people appreciate that. And obviously, personality comes into play. But just like you when you're walking into a home, we're usually setting certain expectations, and we have certain expectations of the client as well. And a big part of those expectations is we expect you, the dog owner, to put the work in. Um, do you have any issues with owner compliance?
Yeah, that can be an issue, and what I tell them up front. So this I think this helps a little bit in the owner compliance is just to mention to them, listen, I'm happy to work with your dog, but just so you're aware, um, if between lessons you don't work with your dog, and let's say I'm the only one working, will your dog get helped? Of course, but I think it may not get as helped or behavioral wise, or if you're trying to establish a behavior, sit, stay down, whatever it might be, the basics, it won't, your dog's not going to learn at the rate that you may expect or would want to if we don't collaborate and get together and do it as a team, basically. And then there's the other thing, the other part of the whole thing is if you're working one-on-one, that's one thing. But let's say you have other family members, you have a husband, maybe some kids involved. Ideally, I like to try to meet with them all together. It's not like mandatory per se, but it's better everyone's on the same page because this way, the husband will say, oh, see, I told you, see, I want you to hear it from the trainer. This is what I was telling you all along, kids or my wife or whatever. So, if everyone's on the same page, it makes things much easier.
Yeah, and that's a great suggestion. And when I'm scheduling private appointments, I say, I'm like, how many caregivers are in the household? And, or they'll say, hey, does everyone have to be here? And I'll say, ideally everyone is there for at least the first session, because
Right.
that's where we're going to set up your training schedule going forward on a daily basis for when I'm not here. Right. Like you said,
Hmm.
because, yeah, if we meet them once a week or once every 2 weeks, yeah, the dog is going to have a decent foundation and you'll see some progress. But the real training, it's on a daily basis and it doesn't end for the foreseeable future.
Right, right. And then the other thing too is, one thing I have done in the past, and I've kind of learned from my mistakes, is like we all do, is you give, I put a lot of effort and work into sometimes behavioral, writing up a whole plan for them. In addition to the regular handouts that I might make up myself or through a newsletter, I might type up a whole thing. And then sometimes if they're not on board, even if I feel they are, it's I'm spinning my wheels, I'm wasting their time. But maybe they are on board. And maybe they look at this 5-page handout like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? Or I didn't realize this much was involved. So I think keeping things simple too, because not only is it simple for them, it keeps it simpler for me too. So we can kind of just do a little at a time. It makes it more manageable because, people have other lives, they have work and other obligations and so forth. They don't have 24/7 to be with their dog, so they can put a little time in and make it more manageable time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that when we keep it simple, I think because it it could be overwhelming, especially if people have like a puppy, or maybe they really went crazy and got two dogs at the same time. Like it could be really overwhelming. So I think that's a great suggestion. And again, I mean, it's what you do, but if there's dog trainers watching this or dog owners, keep it simple. It's it's so easy to get overwhelmed, especially if the dog is acting up or maybe is acting a little crazy. It's we understand how overwhelming it could be at times. So definitely keeping it simple is certainly good advice.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
But yeah, so I mean, do you have anything else you want to add, or any other advice you want to offer to dog owners as far as what they should expect from their dog trainer? Or
I think just what they should expect is just some the dog trainer to be timely, to follow through, to listen to what their needs are and their concerns are, and just be open, and like I said before, be transparent, and don't be afraid to ask some questions, and don't be afraid to say something that maybe they're afraid to say, oh, I hit my dog, or I scold them, or I rubbed the dog's nose in whatever, or whatever it might be. So I don't hold any prejudice, and most dog trainers I think are that way too, because if we don't know these things that maybe it's most public would look down upon or frown upon, if we don't know these things, that's important, because that's sometimes one of the reasons or triggers why the dog is acting that way. And if we don't know that, we're going to get little of any traction.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think generally most of us, we're just there to help. So if you're doing something wrong, yeah, we're going to point it out and we're going to tell you how to do it right. So I mean, short of someone being abusive, then you might have another problem on your hand. But dog owners, especially new dog owners, they might have read a book or something, and they're doing something out of a book, or they saw a video online and maybe they're not applying a certain protocol the right way. That's why we're there to help. So aside from abuse, we're not there to judge or criticize. If you're abusing your animal, I'm probably going to beat the shit out of you, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, I digress. So, well, hey, Dave, thank you very much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. And
thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Anyone in the Bayside, Queens, New York area, look David up, davidsdogtraining.com, right?
Correct.
And I'll throw the link down there, and I'll put it in the description as well. And again, thanks for joining us. And listen, if this is your first time on my channel, take a peek around. And if you like what you see, consider subscribing. Click that bell so you get notified when I upload new content, and you'll stay up to date on dog training, dog care, dog health, dog nutrition, dog rescue, dog whatever. And that's all I have for tonight. And I appreciate you guys stopping by, and we'll see you guys soon.
Take care. Thank you.